Hi everybody, I'm Neil Brandvold. I'm really excited to be here with you and share just a few of the images out of the thousands I've shot in the last 6 years working in conflict zones and covering humanitarian crises around the globe. The famous World War II photographer W. Eugene Smith once said, "Photography is a small voice at best, but sometimes a photograph or a group of them can lure our sense of awareness." I want to take you through two recent assignments. One, behind the enemy lines in the conflict in eastern Congo, where thousands of children have been kidnapped, forced to bear arms, and turned into brutal killers. But first, I want to take you to the front lines of the Ebola crisis in West Africa. When I first arrived in September, things were really rough. I showed up at the JFK hospital in Monrovia to find they had 35 beds with 75 patients. And outside the front door, there were dozens of people literally dying in the streets because there was no room for them to be treated or even provide basic medical care for them. Quickly, I decided I wanted to focus on the work of the local healthcare workers. A lot of focus was being placed on the really great work that organizations like Doctors Without Borders or the Red Cross was doing, but there were local clinics that were completely staffed by local workers, and I wanted to focus on that. This image is from Sierra Leone at the Hastings Clinic, one of the hardest hit clinics in all of West Africa. I met this group of nurses. The nurse in the center, her name's Joya. She's 31 years old. She explained to me that she'd been there for weeks and hadn't been paid. Even the meager salary that they're paid, she hadn't received anything. Her family had kicked them out of the house and were really upset that they were working in an Ebola clinic because they were afraid that they could catch the disease and spread it. And then landlords would not allow them to rent places. So this group of nurses were all sleeping on these two beds inside the Ebola clinic. And you have to remember, it's incredibly hot there. The work conditions are very difficult and stressful. And they would work 2-3 hour shifts in full protective gear. It's incredibly difficult, and it's hard to explain. I spent a lot of time embedded with the front lines, with the Ebola paramedics, with the body retrieval teams. The paramedics were often attacked. There was a stigma that once you get into the ambulance, you're dead. And people were resistant to go with the healthcare workers, to go in the ambulances. So we were often attacked. People would come out with rocks and sticks and machetes and throw them at the ambulance, throw them at the healthcare workers and chase them out. And on the other side, people were afraid, and so they were hiding bodies, hiding family members that were sick, getting sicker. So we received this call, and showed up, and it was a man that was in the very late stages of Ebola. His family members had been hiding him because they were afraid that he would die, and so we showed up to pick up the body, and it's extremely emotional situations. This is his wife, and the community members had come to try to comfort her when we picked up the body. I spent quite a bit of time with the body retrieval teams. This is in West Point, Liberia. The caseload in the early days back in September was incredibly huge. This day, in 2 hours, we picked up 35 bodies. It was the only reason we stopped is because the pickup truck was overflowing with bodies, and there was nowhere to pick them up. So, just incredibly difficult. A lot of the resistance comes from the way bodies were dealt with in the early days. Just due to the numbers, they were forced to cremate bodies, and that goes against a lot of the traditions in West Africa. And there was nowhere for people to go have a funeral. There was nowhere for them to mourn their lost ones. And so fairly recently, both in Liberia and Sierra Leone, they've started the practice that they call the safe and dignified burials. So this is in King Tom Cemetery in Freetown. You can see the family members in the back are able to come, and they're trying to do the burials in accordance to as much of the local traditions as they can. So they're not able to, traditionally they wash the bodies, and that's how Ebola was being spread so quickly. So they don't do that, but they're burying them. The cemeteries are split Christian and Muslim, and they carry out the burials like that. In this cemetery in Freetown, they'd buried 5,000 people since September. And it's growing so quickly. It's right next to the dump that they just have bulldozers coming in that are constantly just pushing the cemetery bigger and bigger. And it's just a stream. Still, I mean, this is just a couple months ago. There's still a stream of bodies being buried there. To stop the spread of Ebola, one of the tactics they're using now is quarantining people that may have been in contact with someone. This is a small community in Sierra Leone, a small fishing community where they had a confirmed case. The first thing that they do is the military comes in and just surrounds the whole area and fences it off to keep people that might have had contact from leaving. The difficult thing is they had a confirmed case, and the family members and all the people that may have touched them are also in the same quarantined area. So there's a lot of fear because they're locked in with possible contacts. The other thing that's been very difficult is just getting food and water and basic supplies. So in some of the rural places, the people aren't given food, they're not given water, and then all they're given is the military shows up and surrounds them and says, you can't leave. Even in some of the places downtown, they're having a hard time getting them enough supplies or electricity to survive. And so there's a lot of pushback from the communities because there's no incentive to be quarantined, really. My last trip, I really wanted to focus on kind of the lasting effects of Ebola. What happens now? The international community is starting already, you know, it's not in the news, people are forgetting, but what happens? So I sought out a lot of orphans and a lot of people who had Ebola and had survived just to kind of see, you know, what's next for them. I met this young boy in Port Loko, Sierra Leone, one of the hardest hit places in all of Sierra Leone. I mean, entire communities are just gone. His name's Ibrahim, he's 4 years old. He got Ebola, his whole family got Ebola, and they all died. He's the only survivor. He survived, but Ebola caused him to lose his eyesight. So you can see how his eyes are kind of fogged over. The doctors say it's a simple surgery, cornea surgery, he might be able to restore sight in one eye, but there's just no resources right now. I mean, they're so overwhelmed and they just don't have anything. So hopefully they'll be able to get him somewhere where he can get the surgery. And then they're in the process of trying to find these orphans, places, like families, someone to take care of them. This is Amara. He's also in Port Loko. His entire family died. He also had Ebola but survived. When the family was taken to the Ebola treatment center, the government came in and burned all of their belongings, the beds, the clothes, everything. He survived and came out, but the rest of his family was dead. And so he still stays in his family's house but sleeps on the dirt floor. The rest of the community is too afraid of him to interact, and so he's completely dependent on foreign aid for just any basic thing, food, water, clothing, and he's just on his own. This is Ali Mami. His brother was the first one to get Ebola. They'd gone to a funeral, and he and his brother washed the body, and then it quickly spread through his whole family. He survived. He was the only survivor in the family. And traditionally he's a farmer, and the government came in right after. They burned all of their belongings, and they also burned their crop. So this was just a month ago that he got out of the Ebola treatment center and came home to find the community's rejected him. He has no outlets no one to work with, and he has no crops, and it's past the time to grow their crops. So he doesn't know what he's gonna do, and he's also completely dependent on the little he can get from foreign aid groups. This is Issa too. Her husband and her daughter they all got Ebola, and she watched her husband and daughter die in the Ebola treatment center. And she survived and came out and just suffered extreme psychological trauma. She complains of headaches, she can't hear well, she says, and is completely dependent on just the help of other people to kind of basic care. do her day-to-day things just because of the guilt that she feels of surviving. I want to show just a really brief clip that I shot kind of showing the current state of things, and it's in Sierra Leone, and just kind of how the crisis is being handled right now and some of the issues. Oh, sorry, that's next. First, so this is a little kind of a happy note. This is one of my favorite places that I came to is this small clinic in West Point, Liberia. The healthcare system, as we all know, just completely crumbled. And so just basic things, people couldn't go in, mothers weren't able to give birth in a hospital, routine vaccinations you couldn't get, and they're just starting to restore some of those basic care things. And so this is a young girl that's going in for kind of routine vaccinations, immunizations. I spent a lot of time there because it's just a really beautiful place, and kind of you see the hope of people coming back, and they're excited to be able to get these basic shots, or there was a whole ward of mothers coming in giving birth, and so it's kind of a nice note. This one cracks me up because the moms were all laughing and the kids were just mortified that they were going to get these shots. It's really funny. But then it's spending, after seeing all this horrible stuff, to be able to spend a day with mothers giving birth is just absolutely amazing. To see hope and the excitement and all of that. So next is the clip.
As soon as we get into the ambulance, we are dead. That was the perception they have. So whenever they see an ambulance, they say, if you go in there, you die. The community members dictated that they wanted to escape, so they blocked the car. So we tracked the patient, the mother. They isolated the child in a car. All we know that she's seriously sick. She cannot speak, she cannot walk. To end the Ebola, that is, we can able to cut down the chain of transmission. If one person is sick, you take him out of the majority, so that others will not be affected too.
The person who died was a confirmed Ebola case. Yeah. So once they knew that somebody in the house they've been staying with is confirmed, if the person was confirmed Ebola positive, most of them ran away for fear of being quarantined. And so those who had contact with the person are in hiding. You don't take chances. I mean, those contacts might have had direct contact with the dead person. So you can never tell. So we need to make sure we get information about their whereabouts and then follow up them for the required period.
We started doing the burial since August 10th, 2014. And since that point to now, we've buried over 5,000 people. A great change anyway, in the manner and way we've been buried before to now. We can bury the other family member in a safe and dignified manner. It plays a very, very vital role because it stops the way people at first were handling their bodies to now. Because before, when people were not okay with the disease, they touch their body, wash their body, and all those things. But because of the vast sensitization that is going on, people, when the loved one dies, they call, and then the burial team goes and collect the body. So with that, it cuts drastically in the cases of Ebola. The future for Sierra Leone, I believe that things will get better once Ebola is finished. Things will get better because the world is looking at us. So I see a better future for Sierra Leone after the fight against Ebola. Post Ebola will be fine for us anyway.
So I see I'm running a little short on time. I wanted to go to the really quick, I feel like as a freelancer, my job is, in particular, is to try to tell the untold or underreported stories. So 2013, For the first time ever in history, the United Nations formed an intervention brigade to deal with the civil war in Congo. And so they deployed, and it was the first time the UN was directly involved in fighting to try to root out the M23 rebels. The rebels are notorious. They've been known for raping, killing, just all kinds of horrible, awful things. But no Westerners had ever embedded with the group for any substantial amount of time. So we negotiated a small team and went in and spent time on the front lines with the rebels to try to get a better sense of their story and what was going on. As soon as we got to the front lines, we quickly found that it's completely staffed by child soldiers. Most of them were 13 or 14 years old, suffering from extreme post-traumatic stress. We were getting shelled by gunships. Heavy artillery was hitting the positions, and it was just these small kids. This boy was just shaking the whole time. He couldn't talk. He could barely load the bullets into the heavy machine gun. This picture, I think, tells a lot. You just see how oversized their uniforms are. Most of these kids had been kidnapped along the Rwandan border and forced to fight. We found out after the fighting, M23 was basically pushed out of the area. A large group of the kids were able to escape, then were captured by people tied to the Rwandan government, and then turned in to M23, who executed all of them. They were buried in a mass grave, about 150 children. We pulled back from the front lines where all the fighting was going on to the M23 compound in Rumangabo. It's surrounded by small villages, and when we arrived, a helicopter gunship had come in. It was the first time the fighting could push that far back, and they were trying to fire on the M23 base, but completely missed and just hit the neighborhood, the small villages surrounding it, destroying all of the houses and killing a lot of civilians. These are young kids fleeing the fighting, and it was just a constant stream of refugees trying to get away that were caught in the line of fire. So that's it. Thank you so much for the time, and I feel really lucky to be here with you.